Hi everyone, welcome to How to Get into TV, Radio and Film. Today I'm going to be talking about filmmaking, what it involves and what it's all about. More about that right after this. So let me get straight into it and introduce you to my guest. He's a filmmaker, he's a writer, and he's directed music videos, commercials and many short films, including The Chop, which has won over 40 awards. Yes, you heard correct. Over 40 awards, which is a phenomenal achievement. Welcome, Lewis Rose. Hi, Lewis.
Hi, Samina. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's great to have you. And may I say, before I begin to fire questions at you, I loved your film, The Chop. It's just so quirky, funny, and I love the way it kind of does that intersection between two cultures. And I really urge everyone joining us today to watch it. Do you know what? I can really see that as a feature.
Yeah, thank you very much, firstly. It's really kind of you, and it's nice to hear it connected. I have considered making it a feature, but I also, there's something which I feel it kind of, the story is told within a short in a way. And so I sort of couldn't think what I would do to expand it to a feature. So I just thought I'm actually happy with, but I have been through various things. Should it be a series? Should it be a feature? And I was happy to stick with a short in the end.
Well, it's phenomenal. I really loved it, so congratulations on that. Now, as I mentioned in your intro, you're a filmmaker. Now, that's quite an all-encompassing role. Can you, for those who might not know exactly what a filmmaker is, break that down a little bit and explain what filmmaker means?
Yeah, I mean, it means different things to different people. I'd say anyone who works in film is a filmmaker. They're all part of the filmmaking process. And so there's lots of different roles you can have within the film medium, both behind and in front of the camera, in production. When people talk about filmmakers, they often mean a traditional sense of a person who, in France, they call it the author of a film, which I think in itself is sort of a bit of, it's not really that true, because a film is the work of many people, but a writer and director is what I am, and people sometimes refer to writers and directors as filmmakers. So yeah.
No, that's great. Thanks for sort of disseminating that. Now, I just want to talk about the writing element, because you are a writer and director. Do filmmakers have to kind of be able to generate ideas and be able to write, or is that not necessary?
No, not at all. I mean, it depends what element you want to go into. If you want to be on the production side, it can be creative and organizational, and you can help nurture other people's ideas. If you want to be more in the kind of craft and crew department, you can, it can be quite technical as well as obviously very creative, be that working cameras, involved in sound, makeup department, the possibilities are endless. And even if you want to be, creating the full, be the author of the film, as it were, you can just be a director. You don't have to write your own films as well. I'd say to people, it's great to try lots of different elements. And, even if they don't necessarily want to write, think they want to write a script, it's always really good just to write down any stuff that might come to your head, things you see in the world, because I think the thing about filmmaking is it's about being curious and getting excited by the possibilities of what's around you and what's in your head as well. So I think staying curious and excited is really good, whichever department you decide to be in and whichever way you go with it.
I think that's really great advice. And I think it's really great that you say that, to get in tune with your environment, to get present to what's happening around you, because already we're surrounded by so many stories which can be translated into video. So actually ideas are all around us. So people sometimes get scared, can I come up with an idea? But actually you can take influence from something in your own life, something from a friend's life, or what you see out in public, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I think we do get very fixated thinking, I have to have this idea and that idea and have to create this thing. And actually, like I said, even if you're not necessarily seeing an end product with it, and that's something I've, learned over the years and was so alien to me at the beginning, was not always thinking of things in the sense of an end product. because so much of it is just making sure you stay excited and stay curious. So, I think just writing stuff down, even with it not necessarily leading that thing itself into a final film, will help keep your mind turning and just seeing possibilities where you might not otherwise.
Yeah, I think that's super advice. Now, you kind of alluded to, the process, the actual filmmaking process. So can you just very briefly give us an overview, like from pre-production right through to distribution? Because of course you've made your own short films, so you would have been involved in all that.
Yeah, so from the sort of first instance, it might be coming up with an idea, and you might come up with an idea either with a view to funding. So you might have seen a fund that is available for a certain amount for a short film, for instance, or you might just have an idea and think, I'm going to write this into a script and see if I can get some funding. So this is from my perspective as someone who writes their own ideas. If, say, you had an idea but you didn't feel confident writing or didn't think you'd enjoy that, you could get in contact with a writer and collaborate in that way. But for my process, I'd come up with an idea and start to write it. And from that point on, I would either have a producer on board who'd help develop the idea with me, as I have in my last 2 films, or in my earlier career, I often produced my own stuff. But I think it's always still a really good idea to be sharing it with, I wouldn't, some people say as many people as possible. I think particularly when you're early on and your stuff is quite sensitive, if you share it with too many people who might tear it apart too much, it can knock your confidence. But I do think you also want really constructive feedback to improve it. So find some trusted people, whether that's a producer or a friend, colleagues, other filmmakers, other university students, whoever it might be, and share your idea with them in your script. And when you've been through some drafts in a place you're happy with, hopefully you can get some funding for it. Or unfortunately, what a lot of people have to do, especially early on, is self-fund. So I worked, a lot of editing jobs, commercial jobs. Well, in that stage, it was more corporate. I did a lot of wedding videos, and I saved up money and then reinvested some of that into my films. But obviously, to do that, especially when you're young and you don't have much money, they have to start very small. So from there, you would start to build up a crew of people who are going to make the film with you. So that's cinematographer, which is the person who is involved with the images that are created through the camera, and they're also in charge of deciding what the lighting setup will be like. You need a sound recordist. Sometimes if you have enough budget, you want a hair and a makeup artist, and various roles that are involved in the production, someone to deal with props who's called a production designer. So you'll start building a team of people who help you make your film.
Can I just interject that? I just like to add to what you're saying. There's lots of amazing groups out on social media, filmmakers or people who do costumes or DOPs, director of photographers. So it's really worth joining all those groups to get connected with people, because then you can start, sharing what you're doing and enroll people into coming onto your project.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's so many ways to meet people in film, and it is about a community. You can't make very few people can make a film in a bubble. It's always a collaborative medium. So I think it's really important to meet contacts, and that can often be people who you meet, at university, just friends, or often, as you say, it's in groups online. And so many of the collaborators who I met with, who I'm still working with today, I just put ads out on various websites. There's Mandy.com, there's Facebook groups, there's WhatsApp groups, there's so much out there. And so I think, you can form relationships which last for years and years through that. So it is very daunting especially if it's your first film, thinking, how am I going to meet the people to make this? How is it going to happen? And I felt the exact same thing, particularly meeting a cinematographer. I didn't know where to start, and I put out an ad and we got on so well, and they were more experienced than me, and it gave me that confidence to say, actually, I can do this. People are friendly, people want to work on things, and that's quite humbling that someone wants to help make your vision come true.
And people are very generous in this industry, where they can see a good idea. They're willing to lend their expertise, sometimes for very little or quite often free, if they really can see the your passion and see a good idea. Now, funding is a contentious issue. As you mentioned, like quite often at the beginning, things have to be self-funded. But are there any particular places people can go to seek funding?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite obviously quite a competitive environment, especially if you live in London. There's a lot of filmmakers in London, but there are funds out there for first-time filmmakers. The BFI do a fund which is a rolling fund. It's open every 2 months, and they fund various different films of different budget levels. And especially if it's your first film, you probably will need something on your CV. It's rare unless you come from another discipline like theatre, where they see that you have some, or maybe you're an artist filmmaker and they see you have a creative track record, but you want to move into film. Maybe they'll fund the first time short, but usually they want to see some example of your previous work. So it doesn't have to be even anything that you put much funding into, even if it's just getting a few people together for a 1-day shoot, very small. But if you can, and also you can film on things very cheaply these days.
Cameras on phones are amazing these days, aren't they?
Yeah, for sure. And either phone cameras, you can start off and DSLRs, and there's lots of ways where you can create stuff that doesn't have to be huge budget but has the ideas there. And I think that's a really good step, not just for sort of funders to show that you have a little bit of a track record, but also just for yourself, for experimenting, finding out the kind of stuff you want to make. Because once you have a funded short, there's a certain element of pressure that you'll feel and that will be expected to deliver. So as much learning and mistakes as you can do when the pressure is lower is really good. I think because you want that first funded short to be a success.
No, I think that's brilliant advice. And I also would just like to add to that creating your own projects. And I always advise people to set deadlines so they get accustomed to working under pressure, albeit lesser pressure than what you've just described. But I think it's good to get into that practice and get super organized and have a structure and a plan, because without a plan, you're just kind of feeling your way through things, and that's higher probability of things not working out.
Yeah, 100%. I think having some targets, realistic targets, is really, really useful. And tracking other people's careers. If you can find someone who is, a little bit further along than you, most people are very willing to give advice and talk. It's generally a pretty friendly industry. So speaking to someone who's got a little bit more experience and seeing how they got where they are and the sort of steps they took is really, really useful, because one of the things that's most daunting and also most, exciting about filmmaking is there are so many routes into it, and there's so many paths. No one has an identical path. So it can be very, very daunting because there's not exactly a roadmap in the same way as there is a normal job, or, a lot of jobs with promotion and raising. But at the same time, it does give you a certain kind of power to take things into your own hands a lot more. But you just need to be able to get some example of the routes people take. Otherwise, it can be very difficult to see the way through.
Well, that's part of the reason, actually, that's the main reason I'm doing these videos with industry professionals like your good self, to showcase to those who are entry level or those who want to transition from maybe another career into media is, look, everybody's got their own story to tell. There's so many different pathways. Don't ever be put off. Don't ever think you can't do it. Just come and watch these videos and you will see how everybody's got a different story to tell. And you can maybe follow one of those stories or create your own story and do something out of the box and do something different, to get into filmmaking. I think that's a very important part of what you've said. Now, you said something very important earlier about, whilst you were trying to make your way to become a filmmaker, you were doing other side hustles to make some money. Now, that is really important to keep a roof over your head and some food on your table, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I'm still doing it today. Short films don't make a lot of money. I'm, looking to move into making feature films, but it's a very long process. So, I do commercial work, which I enjoy, but it's all part of that. You have to earn a living as well. And when I first started, it was kind of baby steps. I had some editing experience. I learned how to edit during my university course, and I thought, well, that's one way I can start to get a little bit of money in. So I looked up all of the wedding video companies in the UK, and I emailed everyone asking. I found a directory online, and I emailed everyone asking if they needed any editors.
Can I ask how many there were?
Oh, I can't remember, but I think it had to be at least 200, maybe more.
That's how you create opportunities for yourself, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing is, you know, you have to hustle. You have to, know that 90% of the people you contact, maybe 95, depending what it is, are gonna, not respond. But you can't let that dishearten you, because there will be ones who get back. And, through that, I started editing. I found 2 or 3 contacts, and they sent me regular work. And with that money, I was eventually able to buy my first camera. And then I knew people who were in music and were playing gigs. So I started offering to film for them for, a bit of cash. So I sort of got some filming experience that way, and I got to travel around, and that led to making music videos. So it's sort of one step at a time, trying out different parts of the industry. If you have a skill that you've learned, such as editing or working a camera or working, in a studio, for instance, with sound, then, really build on that, because that's something concrete. But that's not the only way. There's lots of production companies out there, if you're just looking to get into film in general, who are looking for runners. And obviously there is a lot of competition, but you just have to send out as much as possible, because eventually you will find something. It's just there is a lot of competition, and you just have to keep sending it out and being tenacious.
Yeah, I think it's a very smart move to learn other skills as you go along, because that will always come in handy as you progress in your career. And 2, never give up, right? It's so important to keep continuing. And I love your story about about around 200 people you got in touch with, because that's the laws of probability. The more you put out there, the higher the probability that something good will come back.
100%. And that thing you said about never giving up, it is the most important thing in getting into film and staying in film, not just getting into it, staying in film, is to not give up. You have to be realistic, but part of baked into the industry at every level is judgment of your work, and opportunities that you're trying to get. People are looking at what you're doing, and they're making an assessment of it. So, it doesn't stop at any level. If you're making Hollywood films, you're going to be getting critic reviews. You're going to be getting, looking for funding for your next multi-million-pound film. There's always going to be that sense of judgment. So you have to be comfortable with that, and comfortable with levels of rejection.
And you know what? There's a lot of rejection in this industry. Have you, I'm guessing you have, but can you just talk about developing a thick skin? Because it's critical for your survival. Yeah,
I mean, it's taken a long time. It's not an easy process. I think when I actually started, first came into the industry I was a child actor for a little bit, and did a few bits there. And that like rejection, at such a young age, where I'd gone to certain parts and maybe got quite close to a couple of big things, and it hit me quite hard. And I still miss acting. And I think part of the reason I do act sometimes, but I think part of the reason I moved away from acting is not just because I love filmmaking, which I do, but I think there was something in that rejection at a young age that I found it quite hard to come back from. And so I feel like maybe that set me up to know that actually in film I'd kind of been there, and I'd known how it felt. And so I was able to take it on the chin a little bit more. But I think the other thing with film, which is almost the antidote to rejection, is that you have a lot more power as a filmmaker than you do as an actor, which is why often actors turn to writing their own stuff, because as an actor you're at the hands of the director and producer and the casting agent to decide whether you get the role. But as a filmmaker, there is so much you can do off your own back, even if it is writing down an exciting thing you saw outside and brainstorming how it could be a film, or filming something on your phone with your friends. There's creative stuff you can do that take your mind off the rejection and the yearning to be where you want to be.
Absolutely. There's, like you said, there's more of a scope for creative input because it'll be your idea or something, you know, your baby or your project that you're working on. So just very briefly, is there any additional advice you can give to anybody who wants to get into filmmaking, whether it's be, you know, a writer, director like you, or into the filmmaking space?
Yeah, I think, you know, I spent a lot of time, especially early in my career, worrying about decisions I've made, whether I'd missed chances, whether I was making the right call on things. And, you know, thinking about where my career could go, where I wanted to be. And I think I wasted a lot of time doing that I could have spent actually thinking more about the kinds of films I want to make and what I actually want to say as a filmmaker. And I only think I've really developed that in the past, you know, 2 or 3 projects that now I really have, you know, I won't say a firm grasp on it because you're always discovering, but a firmer grasp on it. And, you know, the industry is so unpredictable that if you have this roadmap of where you think your career is going to go, it's never going to match that. So you have to be comfortable with, you know, that the path will take lots of routes, but that the most important thing is just to keep checking that it is something you want to do. And if you still feel that fire in your belly, making sure that you don't let the rejection put you into, you know, questioning yourself. Just let it spur you on to just get excited again and learn. You know, try and set yourself like immediately achievable targets. So for instance, I want to write a page of script today. I want to come up with one idea from something I've seen outside. I want to make a new contact in this part of the industry. And then slightly bigger, I want to make 1 short film by the end of this year. But if you spend too much time focusing on that huge picture, it's so easy to get down on yourself. And really you can't create when you're down on yourself. So just try and stay creative as much as possible. And if you're ever getting that feeling, just go back to trying to do something creative. Just put your focus on the work rather than the goal.
Definitely. I think being too attached to an outcome is detrimental because then you have huge expectations of something. But I love what you said, you know, take a little step, like write a page, you know, 1 page of a script or an idea or something. I think that's really great because it makes you feel good as well. Once you've checked something off the list at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, I achieved that. You know, I did that. That was creative input. So listen, before we wrap up, just share with everybody what is so amazing about filmmaking. What is the best part of your job and what's the most challenging? Because we've got to get realistic on things as well.
Yeah, I'd say it is amazing. You know, there's nothing quite like the feeling of coming to something, you know, that was just a little spark in your head and then so many amazing people collaborating to make that thing a reality. And when you're on set and you're seeing people getting excited together and you're feeling that, there's nothing quite like that. And putting that through to the final stage of seeing it on screen, it's a buzz like nothing else. And, you know, that really is the best thing about the job is, you know, being with people and the feeling that you get together when you create something as a group. I'd say one of the most frustrating thing is probably the unpredictability and how much waiting you have to do, you know, waiting on other people to respond to things, waiting on funding to come through, then rejection, and then picking yourself up and going again. That is a grind, and there'll be days when you feel like not picking yourself up and doing it again. But one last bit of advice I'd say is, you know, people want to help, and you know, often, especially earlier on, you're worried to ask people for help, and you're worried to ask people for advice because you think that they, you know, are daunting, or that they you know, won't have the time for you, or that they'll see that you don't know what you're doing. You have to look at who you might be able to get in contact with, even if it's just other filmmakers whose stuff you look on, you appreciate online, and speak to them, because it is just about getting a little bit of a pathway. And hopefully as you go on, you'll get, you know, advice from people further up the ladder who'll be able to show you the next stage. But it's impossible to do it just by trying to work it out in your own head and in a bubble. So try and reach out and get as much advice as much as possible, because I think most people spend a lot of time early on, trying to do everything and having all these imaginings, and actually it's really better if you just put yourself out in the world and be open to
absolutely get connected, people. You heard Lewis here. Lewis, it's been an absolute joy talking to you. Thank you so much for giving this great insight into filmmaking. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
That was Lewis Rose, filmmaker. And if you enjoyed that interview with Lewis and I, then please do give this video a thumbs up. Also, if there's anything you'd like to contribute or ask about filmmaking, do post that in the comment section below. If I can't answer it, I will pick Lewis's brain and get back to you and other filmmakers that I know. As always, if you want to keep up with all the content on my YouTube channel and all the amazing guests that I have, do subscribe to keep up to date with everything. It's been an absolute joy having your company today. Thank you so much, and I'll catch up with you next time.